We're live, Charles.
Oh,
We're live.
yes. Aloha no, everyone. It's a beautiful Friday, and it's the 5th of June. Beautiful Friday.
Friday. Is
Yes.
it Friday?
Yes, it is.
I thought yesterday was Friday.
No.
Oh, okay. Well, aloha Friday, everybody. Aloha Friday.
Yes.
Welcome, welcome, welcome on this hot and muggy Friday afternoon or evening or whatever it is, wherever you're at. We got different time zones on this, so it's pretty cool. Hot and muggy. Oh, here we go. Okay, dope. We're all set. Awesome. How was your day, my friend? How was your day? Oh, Senator Kochi is on early today. Holy moly.
Well, today was kind of a trying day. Problems with AT&T as usual, but today was very very hot, very hot. I think today the hottest it got. Just checking the thermometer in my house, it got up to about 135 degrees today. So I am COVID free because
Well,
at 120 you kill COVID. So I was at 135 today. Woo! Was
yeah,
hot.
I'm sure a lot of the viruses died today here in on Kauai. I mean, poof, hot, 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 and the
Yeah,
and the humidity. Jesus, Christmas. But anyway, interesting day today. 9 cases increase today,
yeah,
COVID cases, but not all were new, Charlie. Not all were new. You remember we were I've been talking about them erasing numbers, like we're going backwards. Well, it looks like today they all put them all back. So um whatever they claimed that we lost, all of a sudden came back. And unfortunately one of those was from Kauai. So it's it's kind of scary in a way. The bigger problem, I think, and I'm reading your post today,
yes.
and your little your offers to help with the little calculators and all of that. I mean, it's funny, but it's not funny. And it's not funny because it's real, because it's not fiction. This is real life, real world happening in front of our eyes. And they still cannot get it. And I think that's the frustration for many people.
I'll
uh
tell you what though. I found out something today. Remember, we always had this thing about testing
yes,
and
sir.
contact tracing. I finally realized why they don't want that. Because the person they have that does all the counting probably has only a third grade education. So if they add more numbers, it's going to confuse. So I think he can only count up to 100, right? And he takes it in bulk. So they gave him 6 cubicles, 100 each. That's how he was able to count up to 600 something. But they ran out of cubicles already. They can't go any higher than that. That's why I think they don't want to expose any more numbers.
Oh,
You
so you
think I'm
think
on?
it's a logistical issue. It's just the fact that they just cannot, they don't have the capacity to go beyond maybe 700.
Well, put
They
it
see.
this way. I've seen them go like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I see them counting like that because they run out of fingers. You know what I mean? So I think that I think as investigators, former investigators, you have to come to the conclusion. What do you think, Mel?
you know I that's the reason I stopped doing my daily. I was so excited to put up that daily report and I know a lot of people were waiting for that every single day. And I stopped when all of a sudden, and again, the reasons, it's very hard. If you read the little footnotes in their report, it really makes no sense. It doesn't give you any information. It doesn't tell you that it was an error in the testing or it was this is what I don't understand. Okay, we had counted it as a positive before, but then we finally later we realized it was inconclusive, so we took them off the books. Well, how does a positive test of weeks ago all of a sudden become inconclusive? Now again, I'm looking at this with the investigator mind, thinking, I'm giving them the
Yeah.
benefit of the doubt, but and then it happens again. And then remember when the first death happened, rest his soul, they came out and they said it was a positive, and then, I mean, it was inconclusive, and then they changed it to a positive, and then after he had passed, they supposedly retested the sample and it was negative. And they assured us, Charlie, they assured us that they were going to second and third check these results to make sure that wouldn't happen again. See, I don't criticize them if they made a mistake. I don't criticize them if it's an unforeseen circumstance, because I believe everybody, mistakes happen. But when you tell me months ago that we have fixed it, that in fact that will never happen again because we second check, third check, we check all the clerical reports, this will not happen again. See, when you tell me that, I believe that. And then when you come down the road, and it was, how it was good for so long, and then all of a sudden, we taking back 5 cases. Oh, we taking back 1 case. And then today it's, we got caught. It's like we got caught. So we got to put them back. That's kind of how I see it. And again, that's just my investigator, cynical mind that scrutinizes this kind of stuff, because this is not supposed to happen at that level when we're 3 months into a pandemic, Charlie. We're 3 months into a pandemic. We have experts on top of experts. We have had experts come in and went, and we've heard from doctors from all over the world. So it's hard for me to accept that kind of reporting, huh? Yeah, carelessness, as my wife just said. See, she like squeak them in the background. But my wife said carelessness. Now, my wife don't talk bad about nobody, but she's carelessness. I mean, how else? So for me, at that level, at the department level, at the state level, at a time where we're talking about opening up this economy, we make that kind of mistakes. It worries me. Number one, it just plain worrying me. So tonight we have Congressman Ed Case. Now, I know we have about 78 people on here right now, but now would be the time to hit that share button. Congressman Ed Case is a very tough guy to grab to do a Facebook Live. I will tell you that their office called, and I had sent a request a long time ago, and I had assumed that he was just too busy, but they had responded a week ago and offered to come on. So I'm excited. I've known Ed Case and his wife actually for a very long time. And he has been fighting in Congress for testing. He has been fighting in Congress for a bunch of things, and he's going to talk about all of that tonight. But please share this and share it, and I'll be repeating that tonight whenever I can. I don't want to interrupt a congressperson, but I do want everybody to hear this, because like Charlie always says, we get to hear him for snippets on the news. We get to hear him for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, maybe 4 minutes. Excerpts of what they're saying, but tonight you hear him straight up 1 hour, and he's going to cover a bunch of things. So share this, because we want everybody to get this information.
Well, I wanted to share with some of the viewers out there. Some people have been asking, what are those green paint on Rice Street? Those green blocks on Rice Street signifies where there's upcoming parking, because if you go, the new parking stalls they erected on Rice Street, it's in front of the green paint that's on the road is in front of those parking stalls, and it goes up the road. So I know Honolulu has that, and I just saw it on one of the news organization, I think it was CNN, on one of the marches, that those people walked up to these green blocks that's on the road, and it aligns right where those parking stalls are, on the side of the roadway. So I can only assume that's what it's there for. It's not there for any other reason. Do you have any idea what the green thing is for? Those green blocks?
Well, I will tell you what those green blocks are for, and I will tell you, which is one of the main reasons I didn't support that project, the Rice Street project, the Tiger Grant. As you know, we started off with a 2-lane Rice Street. We spent a lot of money to make it a 4-lane Rice Street, and then we spent a lot of money to bring it back down to a 2-lane Rice Street with a shared lane or a turn lane in the middle. Well, those green blocks are the international symbol for bike lanes. So you're saying, wait a minute, it cannot be a bike lane because that's the travel lane. Well, no. Rice Street is now a shared use highway or roadway where bikes and vehicles share the lane. That's what the green blocks are for. So tell you that that road is to be
Oh.
used. That's the primary roadway for bicycles, not motorcycles, but bicycles. Now, you cannot overtake a bicycle on that road because the turn lane is not to be used for overtaking. And the law also says you got to be 3 feet away from bicycles at all times. So if you are traveling down Rice Street and a bicycle is in front of you, you are not going to be able to pass. You're going to just have to ride behind this bike until he turns or she turns off, or you turn or you off. So that's what the green blocks are for.
Thank you for correcting me. I mean,
Well,
because it lines up with the parking. That's why I thought it was parking.
Well, it's gonna seem to be parking because that's about how fast the traffic will be moving once everything gets back to normal. So the other problem with that, and you see this, is the width of these lanes, all 3 lanes. You are extremely close to the vehicle on the opposite side or to the parking or whoever's on the right side of you. So you got to be careful, people. Rice Street isn't going to go away. Be careful. If you have those trucks with the wide mirrors on the side mirrors, you better make sure you don't hit nobody. That's all I'm going to say. Representative Case is at the door. I'm going to bring him in because he's a congressman. And, you know, how often do we get congressmen here on our show? Oh, my God. You know, this is like, honestly, like, I'm freaking out right now, you know.
Relax. Relax.
Oh, I tell you.
There he is.
I know. Hey, thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us tonight. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Man, we got a great connection. It's clear, it's crispy, and your audio is solid. So we're looking forward to tonight. Again, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're a very, very, very busy guy. How's the wife, by the way? I haven't seen you guys in so long.
I don't have the excuses to come to Kauai anymore. You know, of course, when I represented the 2nd Congressional District, that was part of my kuleana, so I could come over anytime I wanted to, and I did. But since I represent the 1st, I actually cannot travel on congressional business for the most part to the other islands, including Kauai, because my district is Honolulu. I can do it sometimes, but not routinely. I couldn't go over there and do a talk story, but I come over anyway. I mean, I've been over, you know, a couple of times in the last couple of years, but I don't have the opportunity to interact with you quite as much as I used to. So I miss it. I miss representing the 2nd Congressional District. I love representing the 1st, but I miss the 2nd also.
Yeah, well, we miss having you as well. And, you know, I don't have an excuse anymore to attend political functions too. So the paths just don't cross. But, you know, I remember.
You're doing pretty well getting here.
Well, we try. I just got to say this because we had I'm sure you remember this, Ed, when we repainted the Vet Center building that we thought we could wrap up in a day, and you came over, you stopped by, you painted with us, and it was many years ago, but it really said a lot for you to take the time out to come and get dirty with us, and I'll never forget that, and the veterans and everybody else here on Kauai truly appreciate all that you've done for.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your saying that. A lot of good memories. You know, as you know, but maybe some of the folks that are watching don't know. And I've got pretty deep family roots on Kauai. My family lives on Kauai, 1919 to 1966 or so. My father was born and raised right there with his brothers. My grandfather worked for Grove Farm. My father, by the way, just turned 100 years old. So he definitely still talks about the old days of Kauai in the 20s and the 30s. So imagine that. And, you know, I think, you know, one thing I want to say very seriously here is that, you know, although Hawaii has 2 congressional districts, and formally I represent one of those 2 right now, we don't care about that stuff in Hawaii. The delegation never has cared about, you know, whether you represent the 1st or the 2nd. For all intents and purposes, the representative of the 2nd Congressional, and when I was there, it was that way, and it's the way I do my business now in the 1st Congressional. We function as at large representatives. You know, you can't divide the 1st and the 2nd Congressional. It's all one state. So we still do a lot of work with Kauai, my home island, Hawaii Island, and Maui, and the rest of the state. So we're in touch all the time. We talk with your mayor, your council members visit us in DC. We keep in touch with them. So it's still part of my responsibility.
Okay, we'll just get some ground rules out of the way. First of all, that Hawaiian that you see up there that's nodding his head, that's Mr. Charlie Iona.
Aloha, aloha, no.
Aloha,
Retired
Charlie.
police officer, originally from Maui, went to Honolulu, worked at the medical examiner's office for a long time, and then finally made his way to Kauai, where him and his wife, Stephanie Iona, huge community leaders, and just an all-in-all great guy, and we both appreciate you coming on. The ground rules for this show is very simple. There are no rules. So we're gonna turn it over to you right now, sir, and you have the floor. And what we do is we screen the comments and questions, and as they come up, when we see the opportunity, we'll sneak them in and ask those questions. So it's all yours, my friend.
Okay, well, thank you so much again. And to everybody watching, please send in the questions right now, because for me, going through such a crisis in our country's history, and a crisis, right now, so more than one crisis going on. For me, what is really, really critical to representing Hawaii up in DC, which is 5,000 miles away and light years away culturally in many ways, is staying in touch with folks back home. So for me, this is invaluable stuff. These are talk stories. These are opportunities for me to share with you, but for me, more importantly, for you to tell me what's on your mind and what's bothering you, so that I can try to work on those things up in DC. And by the way, Mel, my wife is fine. I forgot to answer your question.
I thought you avoided the question. I said, "Oh no, man, did I just make a boo-boo?"
No,
Tell her.
Audrey is right behind that door over there. She's relaxed.
Tell Audrey, Patsy and I said hello, and we miss you guys. And
one thing
two
about
things that. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
One thing about teleworking, I think we've all discovered that when we've had to telework, and I have been teleworking mostly from home for about 2.5 months now, is you got to get into a good rhythm with the folks that are at home, because you don't leave for work every day. You're in the house all day.
So again, ladies and gentlemen, share this. We got Congressman Case for a little while. Please share this, start a watch party, and get this word out. Congressman.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. If you could just cover in your overview, pre-flight testing, and possibly the Young Brothers ultimatums that have been made in the last couple of weeks. But whatever, man. The floor is yours.
Let me start by saying this to everybody. Please visit my website, case.house.gov. That's my official congressional website. There's a whole bunch of information there on what I'm up to in Congress, including non-COVID-19 related. But right on the front page there is a link to COVID-19, and there I try to spell out all of the resources that are available, how you can go out there and pursue those resources. And I try to give everybody a sense of what I've been doing in terms of COVID-19. So before I get to COVID-19, which is what I think we'd all like to cover here, I just want to say that aside from that, the business of Congress does go on. And there's plenty of stuff going on that's not related to COVID-19. For me, the principal area that impacts is that this time around, I was appointed to the Appropriations Committee, which is the committee that is responsible for all federal spending, for the most part, discretionary spending. So not Social Security, not Medicare, but all of the other major federal programs. And so, we're right in the middle of appropriation cycle right now. We still have to fund the government. We are still very much focused on in the House, where these bills start from under our Constitution and laws. The U.S. House is where the appropriations bills start. And we are in the process right now in my Appropriations Committee of working through the funding of our government for the next fiscal year. So that's occupying a lot of my time right now as we try to get that right. We've worked with your elected officials and your other folks from the government, from the county, from the private sector, the nonprofit sector, to figure out what the priorities are. These relate for Kauai and for much of the rest of the state. For example, just yesterday I was on the phone with the U.S. Department of Agriculture Rural Development, which is a major source of funding especially for many of our neighbor islands. And so that's going on. And there's a lot of other stuff I'm doing that's not COVID-19 related, but focusing on COVID-19, you know, since the very first diagnosis in our country, which was late January. So we're talking about just over 4 months right now. You know, I think for all of us, it feels like a lifetime, but it's 4 months. I mean, you know, we went into the end of last year not even expecting this, so it came out of nowhere. My focus has been really in 3 separate areas. The first area is as a member of Congress, as a national leader, trying to make the right decisions for our country. What are the right approaches that we need to take as a country to COVID-19? That has mostly had to do with emergency assistance. And we have passed 4 bills now that have been signed into law since the beginning of March that have funded emergency assistance across the board to somewhere in the range of close to $3 trillion. And so that was obviously major funding. We refer to that as the CARES Act collectively. I'll talk a little bit about that. So that's kind of the first thing that I've been responsible for. The second thing is, as a representative for Hawaii, I have been very, very much focused on making sure that emergency assistance gets to what is needed here in Hawaii. And that has been a real focus of my office and I for really literally day to day, hour to hour for months now, because you would think it would be easy to appropriate the money in DC and then it shows up, you know, in Hawaii the next day. And that's the last thing that happened. It really needed to work its way through the federal administration. Sometimes it got down here, it didn't work. We had programs that were overwhelmed, like our small business programs for our small businesses. And so we've been really focused on that. And that has resulted in somewhere in the range now of about $7 billion of federal emergency assistance that's come to Hawaii in some way, shape, or form. 3 or 4 big buckets and a lot of smaller buckets. The big buckets, I think everybody's pretty familiar with them. State and county funding to state and county governments. And unfortunately, the way that law passed out of the Congress and was signed into law by the president, it did not call for funding to counties in Hawaii other than the city and county of Honolulu. Although we did fix that in a bill that we have just passed out of the US House that's in the Senate right now. So that was major funding to the tune of about $1.25 billion. The other major areas of funding were small business assistance. These are the Paycheck Protection Program that we passed, as well as the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, the EIDL loans that we also passed. And that funding has now resulted in close to about $2.5 billion coming to our Hawaii small businesses. So that's been a real godsend. We've got probably 25,000 small businesses, including many on Kauai, that have been able to access that funding to try to get through just basic survival, well, much less get to a stable place where we can start to recover. The third area are the economic impact or direct payments, which went to most Americans. The high income Americans did not get those, but most did. And we have seen somewhere around $1 billion plus now come to Hawaii individuals and families. About 600,000 have now received their economic impact direct payments. The last payments are going out now. So if you haven't gotten your check yet and you're expecting it, it should be out in the next 1 to 2 weeks. If it's not, start asking after it. And then finally, an area that I think we all would acknowledge has been one of the single most frustrating areas of dealing with COVID-19 here in Hawaii, and that is unemployment, getting your unemployment benefits. And I think we all know that you know, we went from a very, very low unemployment state, one of the lowest in the entire country, to one of the highest in the entire country inside of about 6 to 8 weeks. It overwhelmed the unemployment system, and the unemployment system, in all honesty, still hasn't caught up. So we're still having problems there. That is administered by the state. Good people are trying to fix it at the state level. The federal side, our contribution to that was to add a supplemental federal benefit over and above the state's benefit, which would put more money in folks' pockets as they dealt with unemployment and last longer than the state unemployment. And that is, we don't exactly know the total amount for that, but maybe it's another 800 million to $1 billion. So those are the big pots. But I'm actually tracking about 75 federal programs, ranging from the ones that I already talked about to, I already mentioned it, rural development, to energy, to transportation, to SNAP benefits for education, to really across the federal government. We tried to help people where they were hurting. And so those programs are all coming into Hawaii, those 75 channels. And we're trying to make sure that they get where they're supposed to get as fast as they can. We've got some real pukas still where people are just not getting the assistance that they need and deserve. I was on the phone today, for example, with the Native Hawaiian Charter School Association, and there's some excellent Native Hawaiian charter schools right there on Kauai. And they're not getting the assistance that they need and deserve. So that's just one example where we need to kind of continue to penetrate the maze of government to get the assistance of folks that are really in need. And then the final area that I've been focused on, I kind of talked about a little bit earlier, and that is aside from the national stuff, aside from trying to get the money to Hawaii, my office helps people with their individual concerns. I mean, as you can imagine, those concerns, even in a non-COVID-19 world, are concerns on areas such as Social Security benefits, veterans benefits, immigration, people just not getting an answer from their federal government and wanting an answer. And so I come in and say, hey, these people deserve an answer, and we work it out with the feds or the state sometime and get them the answer. Well, you can imagine that that's been incredibly magnified with so many people in real desperate, dire need, and just really difficult to get information. So we sometimes call that in Congress casework, because we treat it as if it's a case, and we open a case and we try to solve the case for folks. But there's been a tremendous upturn in people that need individual assistance, individual questions in my office. So those are the three buckets that I've really been focused on. It's obviously been an intense time, but again, I want everybody to know that my office is open, and my staff and I are on the job full time, overtime, trying to contribute with the rest of our delegation and our state and county colleagues and the communities to getting us all through this. You had a couple of other things you wanted to talk about, but I think maybe I'll stop there and see if you want to kind of dive into any of what I mentioned.
I think the first burning question from our viewers, the new stimulus package. I think you touched on the stimulus and CARES money, but the new stimulus that we keep hearing about, how's that? Where's that along? How's that going along?
So we call that package the HEROES package.
Right.
The HEROES package passed the United States House of Representatives, so my house, about 2 weeks ago, and we sent it to the Senate, and the Senate has not yet acted on it, and so the president has not yet signed it. The first 4 bills that we passed, those were bipartisan. Everybody was on board pretty much before they even went through the House and the Senate and to the president. So everybody was, everybody had already kind of, sorted through their differences, and we all knew it was emergencies. HEROES is tougher because the HEROES Act is a huge bill that we in the House believe is the next step that needs to be taken for federal assistance to our country. But in all honesty, the Senate, many of the senators don't agree with the direction that we took in the HEROES Act. They think some of that money is unnecessary. They think that some of the funds should be used differently. They have objections to some of the programs that we have proposed to fund and to assist. And so I don't know where it's going to end up. I believe that some of the HEROES Act will be enacted, but I don't know when or how it's going to spit out of the Senate. And I will say that Senators Schatz and Hirono are very supportive of the direction that the House has taken. So they're not the issue. And so from the perspective of the HEROES Act, a couple of the areas that are in there and may come out are much more money to state and county governments, to include in this HEROES Act, we removed that that 500,000 and above, you know, municipal government caveat on state and local government funding. So the county of Kauai would get direct funding. They wouldn't be standing in line to get money from the state or some of the city and county of Honolulu's share. And there would be significantly larger funding for the discretion of the county of Kauai. The stimulus package, we did propose another stimulus payment to folks out there in the country. And I just honestly don't know whether and how that's going to, you know, emerge from the Senate or from the president, who generally don't support it. So they're not on that page. We might get some of it, but I don't know how that's going to end up. And then finally, the small business programs that I think are really, really critical, especially to so many of our communities out there that, you know, Hawaii is like 96% small business. So, you know, small business assistance is really critical for us here. There is much more assistance for small businesses. And by the way, I should also mention that some of the problems with the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, small business, that have been really hampering small businesses in being able to utilize those programs have been fixed in a bill that was actually, we passed out 2 weeks ago, actually less, 1 week ago, sent it to the Senate. The Senate passed it as is, and the president signed that today. So for the small businesses that are watching, the limitation, for example, that you had to spend all that money by the end of June, that's been fixed. The limitation that you had to spend at least 75% of the monies on payroll, that's been modified to 60-40%. So a little bit more flexibility to spend it on non-payroll related, for example, high lease rent, which is one of our major issues here in Hawaii. So that's where that stimulus is right now. But as of now, it's been confusing to people because I've gotten questions from people saying, well, when am I getting my next stimulus payment? And you're not getting it yet. We hope that you get it, but it's not been enacted yet.
Was there a change in the amount? I saw someone, again, you know, the internet is lots of information on the internet, but someone is under the impression that the stimulus number was $6,000. Is that true?
That is the actual absolute maximum that a family could get if it took full advantage of the stimulus payment in the second act. The amounts are higher, a little bit higher for individuals and families filing jointly. And one of the pukas in the first stimulus package that was a real problem, and remains a real problem for a lot of folks, is let's say you have a dependent child that's above 16 years old. That child would not have been eligible for the $500 addition to the stimulus package. We fixed that. So if you take everything and you add it up and you assume a family of four with a couple of dependent children at the right income level, by the way, because what happens with the this funding is it graduates so that the lower income folks get more stimulus payment, and then it's like income taxes, right? You pay more the more you make, and at some point you don't get any stimulus at all. So it's the same program. So that's the maximum that could happen under that assumption.
Okay, so with four kids and at the lowest income level, you could get up to $6,000.
Correct.
Okay.
I don't know if it's four kids. I think it was assuming a family of four. So family of four, yes, with two of them being dependent children.
Right. Okay, got it. Okay, I hope that answered your question. And of course, one question was, how are we going to pay for all of this? How's the government going to pay for all of this when all is said and done? How do we pay for this?
You know, I think that's an excellent question, and I think that we do have to face that music. You know, I have been concerned about our federal budget for a long time. During my first time around 2002 to 2007, I advocated for federal, much more responsible and sustainable federal budgets that were at least balanced from a year-to-year basis, so that we weren't driving the debt of the country up. And I felt and still feel that this is a dramatic problem and worsening problem for our country overall. Not only from a fiscal sustainability perspective, just running the federal government a good, solid, and responsible operation. But it's also a national security problem because we're borrowing a lot of that debt from overseas, from countries like China. And I don't think we should be borrowing from China right now. It is a major problem. When I left Congress in 2007, the national debt, so the total amount of all debt of the country was, I recall, $9 trillion. It's now passing through about $25 trillion. And before COVID-19, it was about $23 trillion. Now, that was the result of absolute ignorance of solid budgeting by both parties of Congress, by presidents of both parties, by members of Congress of both parties over a sustained period of time. When, for example, we had major tax cuts without the reductions in spending, where we had major increases in spending programs without accounting for the fact that the revenue for those spending programs had to come from somewhere. And everybody said, well, let's just borrow some more money, we can do it. And, there's a temptation to do that. If you can, you're tempted to look your constituents in the eye, and you're tempted to say, well, we can pull this off. You can have your cake and eat it too. And you can't have your cake and eat it too. It catches up with you. And this is definitely catching up with us. We are now, by many of the indicia of how people judge our federal budget, both in our own history as well as against other countries who have the same problem. One principal way to do that is what is your debt to GDP? So the total amount of all the money that the government owes versus the total amount of the economy. That should be balanced. That's no different in concept from any family, any business. You should not run debt up higher than a certain level of your income. And our debt to GDP right now is the second highest in our history. The only time it's been worse is right around World War II. Not even in the Great Depression did we have debt to GDP at these levels. And we're probably on track to go to that being number one. So that's a description of the problem. Now, did we have a choice? No, we didn't have a choice. We have absolutely no choice but to go out and do this. So I'm incredibly concerned about it, but we would have been in far worse shape as a country, much less individuals and communities and businesses, had we not borrowed this money now to get ourselves through an incredibly serious crisis. And so to me, it was not a reasonable alternative, but to borrow the money. Now we face the music. How do we dig ourselves out? Actually, I'm about to introduce in Congress with some of my colleagues who feel the same way I do, from both sides of the aisle, by the way, a couple of measures that try to go back to a concept that we have followed in the past, where we basically force ourselves to make the hard decisions by having a group of members and non-members in some cases come up with recommendations that must achieve a certain goal in budgeting. For example, the debt to GDP ratio that I talked about. So, can we go back to X debt to GDP ratio? And they come back with their recommendations, and it's an up or down vote in Congress. You've got to vote for, first of all, you have to vote on it. Second, you got to vote yes or no, no amendments. No, you can't run, you can't hide. I really think that's the only way we're going to be able to pull this off, because I don't see the institutional will in Congress to sit around and do it any differently. So we're going to have a long and tough road to stabilize our economy and budget and to get it into a more responsible place. And we're going to have to make tough decisions. I mean, you cannot continue this level of spending escalation without raising revenues through taxes. You cannot cut taxes and expect that you can continue to spend at the same levels. Those are the choices.
What was the, as it stands right now, what was the heroes package? How much was that?
That was about $3 trillion.
Okay.
So it was equal to the prior four bills. So the CARES Act, the four CARES Act bills costed out at somewhere around $2.8, $2.9 trillion. And the CARES Act is at least that. I'm sorry, the HEROES Act is at least that.
So the HEROES is probably at or a little more than the prior CARES Act.
Correct.
Okay.
But that's the, and you know, we don't know whether we'll need all of that. You know, we don't know where this is going. We had some good numbers in terms of some stabilization in national unemployment figures today that came out. But there's no reason, but there's still tremendous unemployment in our country, some of the highest levels we've ever seen, closing in at somewhere around 20% nationally. We're much higher here, of course, and it depends on how you measure this. But what really matters is there's just a heck of a lot of Americans that are not working, and the economy is going to be negatively affected, even in the best case scenario, for a long time yet. So we're not, and we don't know whether we will be doing the right things in terms of the public health crisis, and you know, whether we will continue to do what needs to be done, or whether we'll have a relapse for whatever reason and we'll be back in the thick of it. You know, these are things that we can't anticipate. So we don't know how much more federal assistance is necessary. But I think one thing we do know, and that is without a federal government, without federal assistance to start with, we'd all be in a much harder place. There's only one institution in the entire world, which is that could help to stabilize that kind of a magnitude of that crisis that fast than our federal government, i.e., all of us. So you know, that's not some you know, abstract thing over in Washington D.C. All it feels that way. It's all of us saying this is what we need to do for each other.
Yeah, and I guess that can lead us right into the next topic. The numbers, like you said, unemployment numbers starts to look good. A lot of people are opening up. A lot of states are opening up. A lot of people getting back to work, but we still see some numbers, some spikes. And with all the events going on, and without getting into the event, but with all the events going on across the country, with the protesting and the people congregating, and it's happening here in Hawaii as well. The chance for this virus to get another hold on, and in fact maybe another wave or another cycle of this virus, which again could put people back out of work, is very frightening. And I know, and I want to thank you, Ed, because you know, Charlie and I have been doing this now for probably close to 3 months every night, and we've been begging different leaders to, you know, ensure the safety of our people by making sure people that come here from the mainland are virus free, however it is, testing. And I'll never forget that night. And I know Charlie and I talked about it because we do a post-show phone call, and we said, man, did you see Ed Case tonight? He's talking about pre-testing, you know, people to come over before they get to Hawaii. And I was very happy and thankful. And I know we're discussing it. I know we're talking about it. Now the state is looking at possibly randomly testing 1 in 20 people coming off the plane. And Charlie and I both believe that's still not sufficient. Where are we at as it relates to trying to get these people coming to Hawaii tested before they get onto a plane?
Yeah, well, I mean, let's just talk about the basics. The basics to me are once people get off a plane, it's too late. They're here. They're not following the quarantine. Let's be real about it.
Finally, Charlie, we got a leader that actually acknowledges that. I am like, you gotta put the date and time. Hang on.
You don't have 450,000 visitors 450 visitors getting off a plane today. And those 450 visitors are not going to a hotel and sitting in a room for 2 weeks. They're not going to a vacation rental, illegal or legal, and sitting in the room for 2 weeks. They're sneaking out. They're going here and there. They've gotten smart enough not to be all over social media about it, but they ain't hanging, you know. And we don't have the resources to enforce it. You know, so I call their cell phone. All right, fine. You're sitting at the beach somewhere. Oh yeah, I'm hanging in my hotel room. Yeah, okay. So the quarantine, first of all, I support the quarantine as it exists so far, because I feel that it's really the only avenue that we have been able to pursue effectively that in any way, shape, or form tries to maintain the public health side of the emergency of the crisis solution here. But the reason we have that 14-day quarantine is because because the governor had understood that he could not impose a pre-boarding test on passengers destined for Hawaii, at least from domestic, so from the mainland. We can do it a lot easier on the international routes, but on the mainland routes, so SFO to Honolulu or direct into Kauai, the feds have said that the state of Hawaii doesn't have jurisdiction to do that, and it's part of the federal government's control of the airspace. And I've talked directly to the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, which is the federal agency that's responsible for that. And I've said, look, what's the issue? Your laws and your regulations are set up to maximize the use of the airspace, and the only thing you really care about is the safety of the aircraft, the airspace traveling through it. You're not focused on the actual public health consequences of 10 million visitors getting on a plane somewhere and coming here and getting off, and who the heck knows? Some of them come from pretty safe places, the so-called bubble places, but a lot of them are coming from places that never really got a handle on COVID-19 to start with, or they had really, really high numbers. So, for example, a Newark Honolulu direct. I mean, I ain't comfortable with a Newark Honolulu direct and all the folks getting on that plane. Chances are pretty high that they. So the FAA said, yeah, we think we're stuck. And I said, well, confirm that to me. And the FAA just actually answered me recently and said, it's right. We took a look at our laws again, and we don't think that we can do that. But go over to the Department of Health, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, because they may be able to do this on a public health basis, may be able to impose that requirement. So I'm in the Department of Health right now asking that exact question, Health and Human Services. And on Monday, I'm going to be introducing legislation into Congress, which explicitly authorizes the state of Hawaii, the states, to impose that requirement before people get on planes. I've also talked to the airlines about this. And the airlines, in all honesty, they're fighting it. They don't mind if somebody else does it. For example, Transportation Security Administration, TSA, they don't mind if the airports themselves require it. They just don't want to be responsible for it, and they don't want to have to, jack the cost of doing that onto a ticket, making the ticket higher. Okay, I get that, but I don't buy it. I think the airlines should be responsible, and in all honesty, I think we all need to be paying that price, because that's the price of what it's going to take to do a couple of different things. First of all, what we're really trying to do here is three things. The first thing we're trying to do is make people feel safe getting on planes themselves. I heard Hawaiian the other day talking about, all the programs it's doing to disinfect its planes and everything else. And I credit Hawaiian for doing that. So, air purifiers, disinfectants, masks, all that stuff. That's exactly what they should be doing. But they didn't say, and oh, by the way, we're also going to test for people getting on a plane. So a whole bunch of sick people theoretically could get on a really clean plane and infect each other. So we want to get the sick people not even to get on the plane to start with. Then we want people to feel like if they come to Hawaii, Hawaii is going to be a safe place. So are we a safe place or not? If we're not a safe place, they ain't coming. They've got other places in the world that are paying a lot more attention to being safe and to thus being a tourist destination again. And then finally, and I think this is really, really critical. And I think from what I hear, a lot of folks are thinking this. This is about us here in Hawaii feeling safe with them getting off the plane. So we worked really, really hard. We suffered a lot. We have the highest, one of the highest unemployments. We have one of the best records on public health in the entire country, one of the top 2 or 3. But we've got the worst economic situation, the bottom 2 or 3. Now, if we're going to, pay that price, then those people better get off that plane well, because otherwise we ain't going to support tourism. And tourism in one way, shape, or form depends on support from the people of Hawaii. And that support is really shaky right now, especially with people sneaking off quarantine. Just like, well, why are we doing this? So that's a quick report on what I'm doing now. In addition, I would note that I think I and others have been heard on this because the federal government is looking at a broad national standard for how they test people getting on planes. So it's not it's not giving the states the authority to do it, but it's imposing a federal requirement. And they're going to start this out with a test program in some of the major airports in the country. And I'm trying to make sure that those major airports include the ones that are major feeders to Hawaii. So we're part of those tests. So there's some light at the end of the tunnel here. But I think just talking about it has really helped the conversation. So I appreciate your support on that. I think it's led people to believe, to understand what the issue is and how we need to fix it, rather than having somebody else drive our train by forcing us into and by the way, I support Lieutenant Governor Green's visit with Aloha program to randomly test at the airport. But again, that's not good. That's not as good as stopping sick folks from getting on planes to start with.
When we started this program, I guess the passion for me was because my brother died from COVID in New York. So we were trying to understand it, and it was sort of like the image of the boogeyman, because the way it was messaged, especially how we're getting message from our local Department of Health. So we knew that, and Kauai, I guess, we're proud of Kauai because of the record. We're the lowest. We did what we needed to do. And I use this term, and I know Mel repeats it all the time, but we basically scrubbed this island clean, and we pretty much scrubbed the state clean. And even though we had those onesies and twosies popped up here and there, we knew where everything was at. We had that ability to control it. So now the question comes about is because we know that that infusion of new cash can only come from one industry, and we know, and it can come in relatively fast, and that's the tourism. So now the debate locally is, you want the tourists? Are you willing to compromise the safety? No, but it's going to have to go one way or the other. And we're trying to find that happy balance. And I think what you're saying is going to the Department of Health on a federal level and trying to see if it can be worked out to get that testing. That's what you're trying to push for, right?
Yeah. Well, that or actual legislation to say that the FAA to change the law that the FAA is relying upon to say it can't let them do that. So I'm chasing really 3 avenues if you want to look at it. I'm trying to get the FAA to act on it without any legislation. I'm also trying to change the law so that it's clear that states do have that kind of influence, because otherwise the federal government is, first of all, one of the problems we always have for Hawaii and Washington, D.C. is, we have one big federal government, and sometimes they just don't understand Hawaii. And this is a pretty good example. I don't think that FAA really appreciates the dynamic that leads to a solid and supported tourism industry here. So if they just say, well, hey, it's not our problem. You guys can deal with the passengers once they get off the plane. And then we're sitting here devoting very, very valuable state resources that are needed elsewhere, our National Guard, our testing facilities, our PPE at the airport to do all this stuff, our tracking. We have people that are, trying to call cell phones, which is ineffective, really. Why should we have to pay all of those prices? Why shouldn't we be able to cover it on the front end? And I think the balance is, isn't that the major issue of the day is how do you start to open your economy again, especially a tourist economy, which is incredibly, it's a discretionary economy to start with. It's people, go on trips after they've taken care of the basics. And right now they don't have money for the basics. And then if they can go on trips, they choose whether to go on trips and where they go. If they can't travel safely, they're not going to risk it. Most people, at least. Some people will chance them, but most people won't, right? And right. So I think and Kauai has done a great job, by the way. I think Kauai's been an example really to the state and frankly to the country. So a lot of good decisions made on Kauai from my perspective. But now we have to figure out how do we open safe? How do we try to have our cake and eat it too? How do we open so that we get some economic? I don't think this is a choice we have to make. It's a false choice, really. We don't have to have an economy that's unsafe. We don't have to have a safe community without an economy. We can have them both as long as we do it carefully. So let's take care of the things that we actually can control a little bit. Like ideally, what I would like to see happen is is that we keep the rates real low in Hawaii. We continue to do what the public health experts advise us to do in terms of social distancing, all of those recommendations. And then we know that the folks that get off planes are low risk. Then we can all kind of be comfortable again.
Right.
As opposed to me going to the beach and, worrying about whether the tourist next to me came from a hotspot and eluded all of the, didn't care about taking care of me in Hawaii.
How is Alaska managing? We're getting a lot of questions popping up of, I guess the testing program that they have before you can get into Alaska. What program do they have going?
Well, they're in the same boat that we are, and they actually are trying to walk through the same issues that we are. They do not have a pre-board test requirement either, and they're similar to us in that almost all of their, well, a little bit more of their tourism comes from cruise lines, but right now they don't have any cruise line tourism for sure. But most of their tourism does come from airplanes because they're non-as part of our country, and they have a quarantine as well. So they're basically following our model, and they're in the same boat that we are. It's a little bit less because they don't have as much tourism as we have, but they still have the same basic decisions, the same basic dynamic. And they are one of the 3 states in the entire country that have done the best. So it's us, Alaska, and Montana. Clearly up on top of the rest of the country. Montana and Alaska, you can understand, right? Because it's so spread out, so big, people don't live close to each other. But here in Hawaii, I think that's a real testament. We have, 1.4 million people, and we've got some really, really dense places. Honolulu is one of the most dense cities in the country, and yet we've kept the rate down. So we've done something right, but it's come at a big cost.
So now for my last question is, we talked about the federal government and their perception of, or lack of perception of proper tourism. Because Hawaii, we know that before this virus hit us, it came from abroad. It didn't just pop up in our state. So our state, the only 2 ways is through ship and through air. We're not like other states where you can drive across state lines. Does the government see that, we're kind of like in a catch-22 situation where we're locked in? On one hand, it's safe for us because we can really see what's coming on. We can take it on head on. But then on the other hand, it becomes like a 2-edged sword when we open it up. And I guess what you hit the nail on the head is just that sense of that assurance that the people can feel that, hey, these people coming off, they're safe. We shouldn't have to worry about it. So we can live a normal life, put it that way.
Well, I think, it's a big federal government, and we're a small state, and we're 5,000 miles away. And, and very, very good people work in the federal government. They work in the big marble buildings. And sometimes they're not mean about it, but they just don't think about it. So they might be, putting together some national program, but they just don't think about what you just said. They don't say to themselves, oh, wow, let's think about Hawaii here. Wow, are they different? Need something different? They're 5,000 miles away. They have, 2,000 miles, 2,500 miles to San Francisco. The only way people can get in and out are, airplanes for all intents and purposes. Tourism is their #1 economy. And therefore, maybe we should do something different with them as opposed to, tourism in Las Vegas, for example, which is just as badly hit as we are. So I sympathize with Las Vegas, and they're my friends in Congress because we're on the same page. But, not everybody goes to Vegas on an airplane, although a lot do, but a lot come by other means, or tourism, in Florida, for example. Same basic idea, right? So the feds don't always think. So you've got to kind of watch it all the time, and you've always got to go, hey, did you realize what you just said? And then they, most of the time they'll try to fix it for you. But it's you can't cruise on this stuff in DC because otherwise they'll just blow past you. I think you wanted to talk to me about Young Brothers a little bit.
Yeah, I just, before we get to Young Brothers, I just wanted to say that, Kauai, as far as the quarantine, thanks to our mayor and our police chief, they actually do monitor, they check, they physically check the residences, which from what I'm hearing, does not happen in the other jurisdictions. They have the task forces that go out and actually knock on the doors of these visitors, providing they gave you the right information. And that's the other problem. So it's not 100% secure and safe because we, like you said, these guys they've figured out how they can circumvent the system. But for the most part, Kauai, from the mayor taking early action and the follow up with the quarantines have really helped our numbers stay low. But it's still not enough. You know, we still gotta. I agree with you 100%. We still gotta ensure the safety by getting them tested prior to even getting over here. Okay, young brothers. I know you, and I'll let you. I know you have talked about the Jones Act many occasions, but for tonight, young brothers basically ultimatum: $25 million, or we're going to reduce the routes to the outer islands. We need the money, or we're going to. And again, it's almost a necessary evil. It's one of those where you really don't have a choice. Like the federal spending in this case, you know, you don't really have a choice. You gotta release the funds. So.
Well, okay, let's talk about that because I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out whether I agree with Young Brothers or not. So let's start with some basics that I think we all know. I mean, Young Brothers was in some financial difficulty before COVID-19. So this is not the first, this is not purely COVID-19 caused. And that difficulty arose, because of declining volume, a little bit more competition from Matson, which is its own problem, by the way. That's one of the issues for Young Brothers is Matson kind of gets around the law a little bit in terms of their transshipments to the neighbor islands. So they kind of cherry pick some of those routes that Young Brothers would make its money off of. So I think that's an issue for the state. And by the way, I'll say, I'm poaching a little bit into state stuff now. My kuleana is the federal side. I try not to go around second guessing my colleagues in state and county government, but I'll observe what I think. And so what I think is that's an area that really needs to be taken a look at is the fact that for the most part, Matson is not subject to the same regulations Young is. So I have some sympathy for Young Brothers on that. However, clearly the issue for Young Brothers now for the emergency that it's in is directly COVID-19 related because what happened because of COVID-19 is their cargo dried up. The tourists weren't, bringing the cargo over. There just weren't as many people in Hawaii on a day-to-day basis. People didn't have money to spend on, shipping their car from wherever to wherever. And so they should be eligible and take full advantage of federal assistance that's available to companies. So that's what I went to Young Brothers. I said, hey, you're going to the state and you're saying to the state, hey, state, we need $25 million out of your emergency monies, which are federal, by the way. That's part of the state's emergency funding, right? The $835 million, I think it is. They're saying, we want you to prioritize 25 million for us, or else we're going to do all of these, dark things like jack people's rates and stop serving Molokai and Lanai and that kind of stuff. And my first question was, well, did you guys go to get your own federal assistance? Because they're a small business. There are 370 employees of Young Brothers. So they should be eligible for some of that small business assistance. Now, they have a parent, Salt Chuck, right up on the mainland. And there's some question about whether they whether they have to count their employees against Salt Chuck's employees and whether they actually do qualify for these small business loans, which everybody else is qualifying for. But also Salt Chuck itself could apply for federal assistance through what's called the Main Street program, which is $400 billion that's just rolling out now, $400+ billion of loans to businesses of all sizes, not just small businesses. So I said, well, why isn't Salt Chuck applying for the Main Street program to fund through to Young Brothers? And I don't have an answer for that yet. So here's my very honest statement on this. I don't think Young Brothers and Salt Chuck have exhausted their remedies at the federal level, and I think they're trying to. I think they are trying to solve their problem by presenting to the state that this is the only way they can solve the problem, and I'm not convinced of that. And I've told all of this to the governor's office and to the state folks, and I said, well, ask them that question when they get into the PUC. Have you actually exhausted your federal remedies? So if they've exhausted their federal remedies, I mean, if I was in the governor's position, I would want to maintain full, transportation in a crisis like this. And so I would be inclined to use some of that money, but I would want to know, did you actually do everything you could? There's
At the
my,
federal level.
yeah,
At the
exactly.
federal level.
Directly. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Amazing. It's pretty cool. Damn. And we still got 6 more minutes, Representative Case. We still got 6 more minutes. I think we covered most of the questions. I think someone was just talking, it's more of a comment, but it's the tripler doctors and nurses need training to treat Pacific Rim patients. All appointments are by phone and not by video conference. So we're gonna, again, case.house.gov. I know we're not your constituents, but as a prize for being on our show tonight, all you viewers, you get to go to his website and drop a comment. Case.house.gov. Please visit Representative Case's website. I've been on that site, a lot of information. In fact, your COVID information, probably one of the best spots to get everything in an orderly fashion, and it's understandable by a lay person. I think that's the best way to say it. So
Yeah,
case.house.
Yeah, thank you for,
Case.house.gov. Yeah, no.
my office's policy is that we answer all communications to our office that come from Hawaii, regardless of whether it's first or second congressional. So we do pay attention. We do listen to the entire state, and we're here to help everybody. Let me cover the veterans comment real fast because I think that's a good comment, and I've been very, very close to the veterans issue for a long time, but a lot closer now because in my House Appropriations Committee, we have 12 subcommittees, so it takes different slices of the federal budget. One of the 3 subcommittees I'm on is called Military Instruction and Veterans Affairs. So that subcommittee is responsible for all federal funding for our Veterans Administration. So there's only about I think there's there's maybe 10 or 12 of us on that committee. So it's a pretty small committee for a pretty big responsibility. And I've spent a lot of time with the Veterans Administration on COVID-19 related concerns. And as has happened with so many other areas of our society and the delivery of government services, we've moved to telehealth, telemedicine out of necessity because people they can't travel and they cannot, they should avoid direct contact with the hospitals wherever necessary. So that comment is a little bit different from what I've actually heard from a fair bit of the veterans community, that they are in fact doing telemedicine, that they now, maybe they are referring to telemedicine as phone calls as opposed to video conferencing. And I think that is still an issue for many, many veterans because, let's not forget that when we're talking, telehealth, telemedicine, teleeducation, it's a two-way street. You've got to set it up, but also you have to have the equipment and the resources on the receiving end to actually do it. And we forget, especially in the big city here, that many parts of our state still don't have adequate broadband connectivity. And so that's been an issue for a lot of our schools, students, our veterans especially. And that's an area that I've really been trying to focus on, is to improve that broadband connectivity. There is federal money, by the way, for improving connectivity. And I think actually Kauai might be eligible for that money. And I've been talking with KIUC a bit about that. So I know they're pursuing the possibility, but I do encourage, especially our veterans community, because we have about 110,000 veterans, one of the highest per capita levels of veterans in the entire country, and they need a lot of help during COVID-19. So I especially encourage the veterans to communicate with us what their concerns are. We really try to very much focus on their concerns. That's what we owe them, and that's the direction that we try to take for them.
All right. Any you want to tell the people of yeah, I know you're at home, right? You're not in DC. You're at home right now.
Yeah, I'm actually sitting in my house, and I got home. I mean, until like I said, the year started off normal, and then of course COVID was upon us, and really the last time that we operated in Congress relatively normally was the middle of March, and I left somewhere around March 15th, I think was the last week that we had a regular week in Washington. Came home, and within 3 or 4 days, I was teleworking almost all from home. But it's been very, very effective. I've been doing exactly what I'm doing here, trying to stay on the phone, stay on video like this, just meeting after meeting. Today, I probably have had, I would guess, 8, 9 meetings, most of them by video. So I'm definitely able to stay in touch with people, almost better than in some ways, than people having to come to Washington to talk story personally with me. So I think it's going to be a permanent part of my approach. But Congress is now back in session. One of the things I did today was to do a practice full-blown committee hearing with my Natural Resources Committee, and we're going to have our first full committee hearing with voting and all of it next week. I did one with the Appropriations Committee last week. So Congress is having to adjust too, but our commitment is to doing our job for the American people in a tremendous crisis. And I'm one of 435 members over on the House side trying to do that. But for Hawaii, I'm one of only 2. So I get the responsibility, and I appreciate the partnership.
Awesome. Well, we just want to say thank you. Very refreshing discussion. I think a lot of people share the same concerns. The thing with this COVID thing is it's brought a lot of people together, and the problem is that so many people are hurting, so many people are struggling in Hawaii here, especially so many people not working, so many people rely on the tourism industry. But we know that if we open up without being safe, it's just going to put us in a deeper hole, and a second wave of this, a second shutdown would, just as someone described it yesterday, would be demoralizing. And I think that's what I'm afraid of. So really appreciate your efforts and your work up at Congress to help us here in Hawaii. I really sincerely thank you. Charlie.
Yes, sir. Well, I like to say thank you first of all to Representative Case. Appreciate it very, very much. And it's always a pleasure when you have someone that comes on that's very target specific. That's what I call it. You get right down to the meats and bones of things, and you just go for it. And you can just tell by the questions or the comments that come over the screen there. So I'm very, very appreciative. And to the viewers out there, I'd like to say thank you again for joining Mel and I. And thank you for your comments. I know we didn't get to all of them, but I tell you, the only thing I can say is here we have a congressman who's really a small fish in a big pond, 435, and he mentioned that number. But boy, what he said tonight, I'm so very proud. Even though he's in the 1st Congressional District, the entire state is benefiting from him, because as you can tell, he might be that small fish with the rest of the other fishes, but he's making Hawaii's voice heard, and he's just trying to do the best that he can. And I thank you, sir. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much for both of you. Thank you for the folks that listened in. Again, please contact us. If we make the right decisions together, we're going to get through this. And I feel confident in that. But we're going to have to make the right decisions together and follow through. So the road ahead for how we get through this and emerge on the other end and in a good place, I don't think there's a whole bunch of doubt about what that road looks like, but it's a hard road. But we have to do it, and as we do it, I think we'll see it through. So thanks again, and aloha to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Safe travels whenever you do decide to head back to that crazy town. But again, tell your wife we said thank you for sharing you with us tonight, and I hope we can do this again soon, my friend.
Okay, aloha.
Take care. God bless. Stay safe. Love you guys. We'll see you guys tomorrow night with Dr. Kapono Chong Hansen. Stay safe, everybody. Stay safe.
Aloha.
And God bless.